Naruto and Nationalism, The Evils of the Leaf Village by Sage's Reign.
This video is a collaboration with my good friend Weebcrit. In their video, they take an in-depth look at the history of nationalism in Japan and America, and how nationalism has impacted both nations. And together, we look at how it plays into anime, and particularly a favorite of ours, Naruto. They've got some great videos and critiques on anime, so go and give them a watch and subscribe.
I'm 100% expecting Danzo Shimura to show up in this. See, this is the side of the Naruto community that I like. Like, regardless of your stance on Boruto, right? If you like Boruto, go for it. I like certain things about Boruto. This is the side of the community that I'd rather talk to, that I'd rather support. And this is why I like reacting to these things, so I can try to signal boost this to more people. Naruto is such a multifaceted and a deep series. Yes, we have, thriller. We have, sexy jutsu, right? We have things like that. But we also, 1,000 Years of Death, right? But we also have themes of nationalism, of child soldiers, of humanity trying to strive for peace and their failings and leaving things to the next generation to figure out, right? And I mean, we saw this from Hashirama Madara's time going into modern time with Naruto and Sasuke, and now that generation that we grew up with passing the torch to the next generation, wink, wink, to the Boruto cast, to the people that are just now coming into the series, right? I mean, I had the fortune of growing up with Naruto and even playing the CCG towards the end of the CCG's life cycle from about Sage's Legacy to the end, set 28, Ultimate Ninja Storm 3. That was a bonker set. But, kids nowadays and the people coming into the series nowadays don't really have that same connection to characters like Danzo, to characters like Pain, to characters like Deidara, right? They have the Boruto cast. It is us passing the torch to the next generation and seeing their answers. But, no, remember, Boruto bad. Why I associate with only very specific parts of the Naruto community.
First though, let's discuss nationalism. To steal from Weebcrit, I'll also be defining nationalism as the personal or socio-political ideology prioritizing national welfare. The status of the so-called nation state over individual welfare, the status of individuals comprising it. This allows for a spectrum of nationalism. It's important to note that nationalism is not inherently good or bad. Throughout history, there were many instances where nationalism was used for, say, anti-colonial purposes. Fanon with the Algerian colony in France, or Lumumba and the independence of the Congolese folk from the Belgians. Nationalism does not hold a particular morality. Understood in this way, Bernard Yack, author of Nationalism and the Moral Psychology of Community, notes that nationalism derives its moral qualities from the causes and characters of its proponents. Nationalism doesn't kill people. Nationalists do.
Yeah.
The power of nationalism, argues sociologist Anthony Smith, should be attributed to the fact membership in a nation provides a, quote, powerful means of defining and locating individual selves in the world through the prism of the collective personality and its distinctive culture, as he wrote in his book, National Identity. In Naruto, in the Leaf in particular, there is a great sense of pride in the villagers of this nation, and most, if not all, citizens believe in the national identity of the Leaf. Based on several definitions of national identity, it is one that encompasses both political and cultural components, history, national consciousness, and language, all to compose a sense of belonging for the people who belong in that nation. The Leaf's national identity is so powerful and all-consuming, making its villagers' devotion and nationalism stronger than ever. Since the Leaf is a shinobi village, let's take a look at the connection between shinobi and the ideology that they are so enamored with. Shinobi are not just people who defend the village. Their existence is much more than that. Shinobi are the main military power for their affiliated nations, and they can bolster a nation's economy and political prowess when one land is particularly strong in battle, because strength attracts outside commissions from those wealthy enough to purchase their services. So more than the loyalty and honor that these shinobi are supposed to have, they also exist as these heavily politicized figures, as tools of greed and elitism to bring wealth and status to other allied nations. Shinobi villages are breeding grounds to create people who know nothing except for loyalty, honor, and how to fight, deceive, and lie. They are the ultimate tools of the state. But on a personal level, being a shinobi is a continuous act of severance, separating oneself from one's own heart.
sorry, that's actually a good way to word it. Actually, they are a tool of the state, right? You can argue that a nation's, in Naruto at least, a nation's strength can be directly tied to the presence of a large village, right? Sure, we have like the Land of Iron, right? You know, the samurais, right? But you know, literal samurais that have showcased they can go toe to toe with, you know, Jonin or even Kage level opponents, right? Satosa, if you've actually played the CCG and know what rank that is, right? Which is a CCG specific thing. But it's very interesting to think about. I mean, we have minor villages, right? Wasn't Hidan from Kusagakure, a village hidden in the grass? His headband always was one of those weird ones. We have the Hidden Sound Village, which is Orochimaru's thing. But I mean, you don't really hear about anything outside of the big five, right? Iwagakure, Sunagakure. Why can I not? It's not Mizugakure. I can't actually remember the mists offhand right now, and it's killing me because I'm definitely a mist shinobi. Like, personality wise, I love the hidden mist. God, I love it. Konohagakure. Yeah, no, we got stone, sand, mist, cloud. I always forget Kumogakure. I always forget the Cloud Village, despite Killer Bee being an amazing character, and Konohagakure, like the big fives. And we even see like the five daimyos, right? We didn't really even see those until after the 5 Kage Summit, till the Shinobi World War, or 4 Shinobi World War. So like there's a government and things beside from this. And we know that things exist even from early on in the series. Naruto world built very early on with, you know, Gato and building the bridge, and, you know, there being corporations, right? That Gato headed, and people who aren't just Shinobi. We are effectively think of like, and this is going to be the weirdest way to explain it. This is like the bare bones, okay, you can look at it this way. Is it necessarily the most correct? Probably not. But think about every single village like either a military from around the world, or even if you want to be in the US, think of it like a military, each of the military branches, right? So you have Kumogakure, which is like, you know, Hidden Village in the Clouds, right? Which is kind of like US Air Force. And the Hidden Leaf, which is, I don't know, like the US Army. And then you have like the Mist Village, which is like, I don't know, the US Marine Corps, right? Or US Navy even, right? So or you can, you know, as if we go on a macro scale, you know, have the U.S. military, which is like Konoha. You have the Korean military, which is like, you know, the Cloud Village. You have all of these comparisons are just offhand. I have no basis on like assigning them to each specific village. I want to put like correlation is not there, just explanation purposes, right? So we're effectively getting back to my actual point. We're seeing like these villages who are raising and educating child soldiers to climb the ranks, to be better soldiers, to hire out, because their economy is very much driven on, we export, you know, war, subterfuge, conflict, defending, you know, things like that as a service, right? I mean, it's why we have the Anbu Black Ops, right? Hey, you need a target ganked? Cool, send the Anbu Black Ops, right? Like what we see in Naruto is it focuses on the story of, you know, the Uchiha clan, especially in Shippuden. But we see a very focused perspective of it. Like the world still turns regardless, right? Just because, you know, in the first few chapters we have Gato showing up like, hey, I need a bodyguard to show up, right? You know, to help finish this bridge, and not actually giving out the full information, right? And it's why we had the whole Jonin, Chunin, Genin, you know, structures like that actually cemented early on, which was great from a world building perspective. But you're effectively seeing into like warring states, like into these like warring villages who create soldiers. Like that's kind of their export, right? It's very interesting. It's very interesting to think about. Like yes, they are a tool of the state. I would absolutely argue that the economy of a large ninja village and the size of it and the prominence of it is directly correlated to the size and wealth and prosperity of the nation that it's tied to. Remember, it's not the nation of the Hidden Leaf. It's the Hidden Leaf village in the Land of Fire. It's the Hidden Mist village in the Land of Water. Relevant distinction.
Art and giving oneself wholly to a nation, to a government, to something bigger. Being a shinobi is self-sacrifice. As Haku says it, as full-fledged shinobi, their philosophy is that they are expected to kill their own heart with their blade, just as the kanji, the word shinobi, was originally the words heart and blade. Ninja are not only expected to remove their emotions towards their opponents in battle, but any emotion towards their own friends, comrades, and even families, if it doesn't serve their nation. Rule 25 of shinobi conduct is that no matter what happens, true shinobi must never show their emotions. The mission is the only priority. Carry that in your heart and never shed a tear. These are rules that shinobi of every village follow, rules across the entire shinobi world, and some villages have it worse than others. The Bloody Mist students, for example, were forced to fight to the death to graduate. Kisame, back when he was a shinobi, was of course tasked with killing his own comrades to ensure that valuable information didn't get leaked. These children are made into these fighting machines while still having to bear the weight of their humanity. They are humans with wants and needs. Humans who yearn for connection. They are taught that they shouldn't be concerned with the reason for their own existence, that they only exist as tools for their nations. But bubbling underneath the surface of their minds, Kakashi says, disturbing them, is that purpose. What type of person are they if they can kill their own comrades in cold blood? A thought that the White Fang once had. Almost every non-rogue shinobi we see has at least one companion with them. Teams of 3, teams of 4, we've even seen rescue units with 8 members. We don't see it, but they spend days, weeks, and sometimes months traveling with each other, going to foreign lands, breaking bread together, protecting one another. And yet, a shinobi should be able to sever any connection should the nation ask for it.
It's incredibly militaristic, right? And you notice, like, they non-rogue shinobi do travel in cells. Not only is that for, covering each other's blind spots and stuff, right? Like, for example, Neji with his Byakugan, or Hinata with her Byakugan, is able to see certain things that her allies can't, right? He was able to make very direct, aggressive attacks, right? And even shapeshift up into double-headed, twin-headed wolf form, right? Let's just take Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura, right? Naruto and Sasuke can crack their heads against whatever god-level opponent that they want to. Sakura is still able to heal the both of them and has the express understanding that you live because I let you live, right? Once again, the medics are the scariest people ever in any universe game, etc., okay? The medics make sure that you're alive. The medic wasn't there. The medic controls whether you live or die. Let's put it that way. So they definitely cover each other's blind spots, right? And Naruto has different sweeping attack patterns than Sasuke has, and that that comes down to things like nature transformations as well, right? Sasuke is a very aggressive person. His style is very aggressive, right? He has Katon fire release, and he has Raiton lightning release, right? Inherently, right? Which is going to lead him to be a lot more linear in his attacks. He's going to have, he's going to be able to fall back, do wide sweeping, fire style attacks, but he's also going to be able to charge ahead directly with trying to shove his Chidori through somebody, right? We even see evolutions on the Chidori technique, like with Danzo, where he creates a Chidori sword to pierce right through Danzo and Karin both. Naruto is going to he's very solo, self-sufficient oriented, where Naruto is very team-oriented. That's why the symbol of his loneliness, quote-unquote, is a shadow clone jutsu. There are things Naruto alone cannot do, and thus he needs to use shadow clones to achieve that same goal. It's just showcasing different things. But when we move into the unit structure, it's very militaristic, right? Imagine, if you will, if you're, say, served in the military, right? You have your unit, right? But you might know John from that unit over there, or you might know, Carrie from that unit over there. Like, you still interact with each other. Like, you still know that you're, still part of this militaristic society, if you will, being in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, etc. Is it necessary to the same degree? I do not have enough understanding on military matters to say so one way or another, right? This is definitely, I would argue, an extreme view of it. Like, the mission is first and foremost, right? And I'm sure in some capacity in the military it is as well. But the mission is first and foremost. It does not matter if all of your companions go down. You must prioritize that mission. So we do see an extreme devotion and extreme emphasis on missions in Naruto, right? Once again, you could argue that they're definitely militaristic city-states, right? All the ninja villages. Once again, producing soldiers. Are they producing individuals? Are they producing people? I mean, sure, they're shopkeepers and stuff, but the main focus of the story, the characters that we know, are, for all intents and purposes, all soldiers, whether they're children or not.
Because their own reasons for existing, for living, do not matter, because they are tools for the state. A big part of it has to do with their deep indoctrination. What else do these shinobi know but their jutsu or their ninja weapons? What else do they know but how to deceive and manipulate? How to sacrifice? For the Leaf, the greatest ninja of their times, the Hokage, their faces are immortalized in stone, watching their every step. Every day when they step out of their homes, these figures are larger than life. How can we not grow up with this goal in mind? This desire to be remembered, to be a village hero? To quote Smith,
Membership in a nation promises individuals redemption from personal oblivion. In a secular era, Smith argues, identification with the nation is the surest way to surmount the finality of death and ensure a measure of personal immortality.
Professor Yael Tamir makes a similar point in The Enigma of Nationalism, arguing that
as long as the nation endures, it will show gratitude to all who struggle and sacrifice their lives for its survival. It will turn them into heroes, perhaps canonizing them, even if they come from a vile or a noble background. In this sense, nationalism is an egalitarian ideology, as is best illustrated by the uniformity of military cemeteries, where rich and poor, educated and illiterate, all lie below identical tombstones in a paragon of equality and fraternity.
The village promises that no matter what family you came from, no matter what circumstances you were made in, if you sacrifice yourself for the state, you can gain that love, that admiration, that immortality. There is nothing that will bring you more satisfaction, nothing that will bring you more joy, and most of all, nothing that will bring you more honor than protecting the village. But if a shinobi has that bubbling ideal that has now risen to the surface, and they no longer believe in the national identity, what happens if they want to, say, leave the village? Quickly we learn that there are consequences for questioning one's identity. Should a shinobi leave the village without approval, there is a chance that they will get branded as a rogue shinobi because they've abandoned their duties, which is a criminal offense. There is also...
I mean, effectively going absent without leave, right? Like, hey, you're leaving that nation, quote unquote. You're leaving the city-state of, in Sasuke's case, right? He left the Hidden Leaf Village. He is absent without leave. He has forsaken the Leaf Village, therefore being branded a Nukenin, a rogue ninja, right? And we see this with other things like the Akatsuki, a bunch of individuals who, for one reason or another, forsook their respective nations and effectively got together and just an organized terrorist. So that's what the Akatsuki were. The Akatsuki were terrorists. Like there's not really anything else you can really say. I mean, sure, some of them were artists like Deidara or Sasori, right? And they have warring ideologies on what art is. Art being an explosion versus art being maintaining beauty, right? Puppets, right? Versus the warring ideologies of Itachi and Kisame, right? Where Itachi himself, as we learn later on, being someone who wanted to preserve peace, where Kisame is, as far as I'm aware, he didn't really advocate for war, did he? Kisame's kind of an interesting look. I think that he got ganked way too soon, but he was also, to the end, him and Itachi were somewhere in that to the end that they held their respective beliefs, where Itachi wanted to be seen as the villain towards the very end, and Kisame wanted to withhold intel by any means to the very end, right? And there's a number of parallels and there's a number of diverging points you can argue with each of the Akatsuki members, but for all intents and purposes, they did something or were unsatisfied with the specific villages that they were in, and one reason or another, they left and were branded as rogue ninja. So there is a very real consequence to abandoning your faction, to abandoning your village in the Naruto universe.
A chance of being hunted down or killed for the information they possess about their village. So if you can't desert your village for fear of being hunted down, if you don't believe your village's ideals, what choice is left? There are two options. Sakumo Hatake took his own life because he felt as if there was no other choice. He was clearly unhappy with Konoha's ideals and took it upon himself to save his comrades instead of the mission. But he could not manage the pain of being relentlessly humiliated and shamed by his own people for choosing his friend over the state, and so he could not bear it, perhaps not only for his pride and honor, but for his son's future. So he took his own life. Shisui Uchiha did not agree with the Konoha Council. He didn't agree with the nation, and so he was met with Danzo's wrath, who took his eye. He knew that they would kill him for his other eye, so for him, death was his only option. It goes to show that no matter how talented you might be, no matter if you already work for the state, for the government, the nation will only see you as a tool and one to still be used even after your death, if you cross them. Shisui felt that he would be hunted until the day he died, and so he took that control into his own hands and took his own life. Being a shinobi in Naruto is like an act of seppuku because of one's willingness to sacrifice oneself for their country. Danzo, when fighting Sasuke, tells him about Itachi and he tells him specifically that self-sacrifice is what it means to be a shinobi. York professor Toyomasa Fuse suggests that there is a sense of autonomy and authority when it comes to seppuku. He writes that in natural death caused by aging, therefore death will come to the person unavoidably and externally. You are the passive and helpless victim of nature's inevitability and fate. But the voluntary seppuku involved an elaborate and rational planning as well as a psychological preparedness in the form of willingness to die for a cause. In this process, the samurai is the active agent for his life and death. To wit, he holds total mastery on his life or death.
Which it's interesting. It's always interesting to look at different ideologies and different things from around the world. To which someone in America, right? Someone can look at that and go, well, that's death is death. Someone else could look at this and be vehemently against the tradition. Someone else could go, well, considering Japanese beliefs and systems like Bushido and stuff, this is a perfect extension from that. Even then, some in Japan could argue that this is a radicalization of something like Bushido. It's very interesting to hear, at minimum, different perspectives from around the world, but not only to hear different perspectives from around the world, but be able to see where they evolved from, how they evolved, how opinion has shifted on them, what things have had an effect on other things, right? Like how the commentary on nuclear warfare was a direct result, or it was a direct impact on, for legal copyright reasons, giant lizard kaiju, wink wink, in Japan, right? Or how oh god, I had another one lined up and I totally was trying to avoid name. But yeah, like how certain things affect other things. And we can even see now how the selfless nature of that that also can seep into certain elements of Japanese culture, especially historically, show themselves and present themselves in the Naruto series.
In seppuku, he is the active agent who will bring about his own death with his own decision. Unlike the natural death in which one is a powerless and helpless victim of nature's whim, it is not God or fate or the inevitability of aging, i.e. other agents than one's own self, that will bring death. It is rather the man himself who will hasten or bring about the termination of his own life with his own volition and choice. With this line of thinking, those shinobi who feel that they have no control over their lives can at least persuade themselves with this illusion of control, with this illusion of agency. At least this way they can sacrifice their lives for, say, honor or something greater than themselves. But as Weebcrit writes in their critique of this very idea of honor in death, they say that, quote, honor in death is nothing more than an afterthought, and in reality, none of the hard work of nation building or maintenance is done by dead men. The living, and especially women, children, and any colonized refugee or otherwise directly impacted populations are left alone to answer the radically complex and practical questions of rebuilding the nation after war.
The war doesn't end when the conflict is done. I mean, we've seen this historically in how many conflicts, right? Look at Germany in World War II, right? Were there not economic issues, instability after that? Did we not have, not only Germany itself kind of split up, but did we also not have Berlin itself split up? And that led into the, capitalism v communism, many things down the line. The war doesn't end when the last shot is fired. There's still rebuilding that has to go on, grief, understanding what happened, trying to rationalize things, trying to get even everyone on the same page. War ended, cool, everything's fine. Well, not really, especially if in a situation where a larger power occupies a smaller space and the larger power pulls out. Does that not leave a power vacuum that many can potentially take advantage of, right? Let's hypothetically say there's a small village hidden in the rain, right? Even in Naruto, right? You have Leaf interests in there. You have Hanzo who was up and coming, and he was defending the hidden rain village, Amigakure, and there was a whole battlefield there in the Third Shinobi World War, was there not? And that's how Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru became named the Sannin, right? For being able to hold their own as a three-person cell against Hanzo the Salamander, to which we end up seeing Leaf interests and Hanzo's interests, specifically spurred on by Leaf interest, namely Danzo, because everything comes back to Danzo. It really does. Danzo is a really good character because he's just a really old, nationalistic, asshole old man. But he does it so well, and I kind of love him for it. that's how we have, the Nagato Yahiko situation, and the formation of the Akatsuki and the assassination of Hanzo the Salamander, and the rise of pain, right? In his philosophy as well, to want others to experience his same pain. That way the world can enter an era of peace, right? So this, now that everybody knows what pain is, everybody can acknowledge that and move forward together. But that's not necessarily how people work.
For Danzo here and for Itachi, those who have forsaken their lives for their nation, they do not have to deal with the consequences of what they've left behind. It's characters like Sasuke and Tsunade and all the rest of the living, they are the ones who do. So many ninja in the Naruto world believe that they hold total mastery of their own lives and thinking, when they are in fact barred from ever challenging the systems that power their world. But thanks to the Will of Fire, more often than not, most shinobi believe in its collective power. As Weebcrit eloquently puts it,
good citizens, but particularly men and boys, do not hold their own moral or political aims. They are ceaselessly loyal to their nation, no matter what it's fighting for, which is often unstated. Bad citizens have moral or political motivations that deter their wholehearted commitment to the village, often resulting in their abandonment of the village identity, or in the case of Sakamo, both of these are reinforced by the Will of Fire, which is said to reside in those persons who die or otherwise commit their lives in service to the village. In that sense, the will that's embodied in the Will of Fire is that of the nation, not of the individual.
Yeah?
As a child, Hashirama knew that there was something inherently wrong with the shinobi world, as he buried his own younger brothers because of the wars that they, the children, had no real stake in. Thus, the creation of a village that would allow children to actually be children and not have to fight in the wars of adults was born. A dream that he was willing to die for. This dream turned into the village, and then the village's ideal would then become the Will of Fire the day he decided to kill his best friend to protect said dream. Shinobi uphold this ideal, and the Will of Fire is the belief that the village matters more than one's own blood, because the village itself will always protect its own, and more than that, they will protect its future. Madara predicted this would be...
It's very interesting to think about how Hashirama, because we've done a previous video on this, there's a previous reaction, I think we did on this, where Hashirama is in fact a large hypocrite, I believe. Because you even see his ideology change. You at a certain point see his ideology change from going into the Leaf and wanting a place where, kids can be kids, right? They're not necessarily having to worry about warfare, to have to bury their friends and siblings, into him, taking out Madara, his oldest friend, someone he had considered a brother, for an ideology that, for all intents and purposes, Madara didn't want to be a friend with him because of, right? Like, Madara was a friend with the Hashirama before the village and going into the village. The village did change Hashirama. And to see that philosophy shift is wild, especially like to look at it from different angles. Just this series has so much to discuss. There's so much here. This is why it's always hard to have a conversation, because there is a lot of filler. There is a lot to go through. I mean, it's just so much, and it deals with a lot of themes that a lot of people don't necessarily want to deal with or want to think about, right? Danzo is a very simple character. Like I said, he is an old man. He is a nationalistic asshole, but he's simple in that regard. He is what he is. And he will, replace village safety or replace village with national security, right? He's going to take those Uchiha eyes to ensure national security. The amount of jokes about just, oh my god, I can't not see Danzo in certain aspects and just, I did not steal those eyes. I am not a crook. God. The Nixon memes write themselves. They're great. They've been really funny to hash back and forth. But that's the thing. Like, you can't have this conversation with a lot of people, because how in deep Sage's reign is going, and how kind of left field I'm going, and even detracting from this piece by some of the tangents I'm going on, like, not a lot of people look at Naruto in this light. And so I have a lot of respect for people like Sage's reign that are able to understand themes at play here, that are able to bring things like nationalism and the evils of the Leaf to the forefront and have a coherent discussion about it, and bring reasoning and rationale for it, and who are able to, dissect the themes at play here and be able to discuss them, rather than just, another, Lamau, this happened, or, you completely miss things altogether, right? Because somebody can absolutely just be like, no, I don't like Danzo. Well, why don't you like Danzo? I don't know. Just he's a boring character. He doesn't really do anything. Okay, but does he not really do anything, or do you not understand the character at play there? And even then, there's things about Danzo that I'm probably not picking up on right now, at least in this discussion, that people are going to outline, right? There's so much depth here. And this is why I pick and choose what anime, manga series that I look at, because I cannot stand series that are just two-dimensional. I can't. There's so much depth to this. There's so many morals at play here. The will of fire, a collective to keep on going, to pass on to the next generation, right? To ensure survival, right? And that being tied to nationalistic interest, right? You have things like that. You have things about questioning not only yourself, but questioning the systems around you, the very systems that you've benefited from, and people have, fallen before you to protect and ensure lives on, right? And questioning that can lead you to becoming a rogue ninja, right? People become rogue ninjas for a number of reasons, right? I mean, Kakuzu was kind of a madman for just taking hearts and doing what his immortality jutsu, like. There's so much at play here, and there's so many things that you can just take a look at, reflect on even a little bit, and apply basic logic and common sense principles to find just amazing answers.
A mistake, and in the future mentions how Hashirama's nation building bore a paradox. He has created a nation who kills in order to find peace. Hashirama set a violent precedent. To quote Weebcrit once again, they write,
This is a great example of how nationalism breeds militant protectionism, as we observe the emergence of a national village identity that transcends the value of the people within it. This is ironic, since what is a village if not the collection of people housed inside of it? A village identity implies the existence of a non-village other, which threatens the purity and safety of the village should they come and interfere. This is one of the rationales for both colonialism and strict immigration policies, which we can observe throughout Japanese and American history.
Hashirama's will of fire became the country's national identity, a country built then on militant protectionism and sacrifice. A country that would do anything to protect itself by any means necessary. History professor Dr. Fujitani in the Meiji at 150 podcast says that we need to come to grips with the price of nationalism. Though it can be healthy in cases like those mentioned, it carries a logic with many negative repercussions. He says that there is an inherent berserkness to it that needs to be tempered and quelled before it transforms into something dangerous, like racism or fascism, or into what we see happen in Naruto. The Leaf Village is a representation of these repercussions, and the Uchiha clan becomes the one outstanding casualty.
Well, and that's the thing. How long before this becomes something like xenophobia? How long before it comes down to an us versus them thing, right? The hidden sand village coming in to the tuning exams, right? Or the hidden mist village even coming in. Sure, maybe it's kind of a tuning exam kind of thing. Get a bunch of villages together and do things, right? But how long before it's like, well, they're from Iwagakure. They're from the hidden stone village. Old geezer, fence sitter Kage, right? Onoki, right? Some of his radical ideology. How long before the us versus them enters the conversation? Because it's a very slippery slope and a very easy one at that to engage in that mentality. And even then, it's very easy as the Uchiha clan were an internal entity, right? The two big clans in the Warring States era were the Uchiha and the Senju, were they not? So the marriage of the clans, the peace treaty, the accords between them, led to directly into the village system, right? And thus we see the meeting of distributing the tailed beast from Hashirama, but that's a little down the line, right? But I mean, now we get to see an us versus them mentality of, well, the Uchiha and Madara, they're following Madara's thing. Madara left the village, and Hashirama had to take care of Madara, and especially because Tobirama, I'd argue, is definitely a little bit of a radical, right? I think that's incredibly fair to say. Pigeonholed the Leaf Police Force by, you are the Uchiha, therefore we will make you into the police force, thus separating them in certain capacities. Whole discussion on that I don't remember the finer points on right now. Know that it did play a large part into kind of the radicalization of the Uchiha clan, up until the point that, there was going to be a coup d'etat. There was going to be an Uchiha coup, especially because they were being blamed for the Nine Tails attack, right? Which was Obito. But, I mean, the Uchiha were being blamed for because, they have those eyes, and they're going to be a threat to national security. They're a threat to the Leaf because they can control the Nine Tails. interesting how that all works out, right? And then you end up in a situation where, Shisui tries to divert the war, or tries to avert the war by using Kotohama's Kami, but Danzo, being Danzo, is like, nah, your plan sucks, my plan or no plan at all. Take Shisui's eye, Shisui ganks himself, untrusts his last eye to Itachi. Itachi and Obito take it on Itachi realistically takes it on himself to gank the Uchiha clan, which Obito does help take part in because of some deal that they made. Like, there's just so much there, and the ideals of nationalism and us versus them are so prominent into just some of the just even the inciting incidents to the story, right? The Uchiha clan's massacre, right? Sasuke from very beginning, episode 1, episode 2, talking about there's someone I was sworn to kill, in reference to Itachi, who we learned later was responsible for wiping out of the Uchiha clan. There's so many layers here.
One major blight on the national identity of the Leaf. Hashirama once suggested that an Uchiha become Hokage. After the death of Madara, no Uchiha would ever come close to not only becoming Hokage, but even earning a seat on the Konoha Council, the elders that make the most important decisions regarding the village. No Uchiha were ever even advisors to a Hokage. Instead, Hashirama passed his role down to his brother, who believed that the Uchiha were an inherently dangerous people. Tobirama has...
Can we just talk about, once again, right? The Uchiha clan were the second most... They were tied for the most powerful clan, were they not? Like, they were the two big players. To not even be given a seat at the table, that is a disgrace. That is a dishonor. That is... You are now being treated as second-class citizens. Like, the Senju have subdued you. They own you. And chat's saying, that, the freedom of the Uchiha is going to be further and further restricted, especially from a radical like Tobirama.
Always had a problem with the Uchiha, dating back to his battles with Izuna, and especially with Madara Uchiha. Being given now the opportunity to protect the village by any means necessary, being given that blessing by Hashirama, it gave the second Hokage free rein to uphold the village identity, and to continuously fight against the quote, other, even if that other lived in the very same village he governed. To Tobirama Senju, the Uchiha threatened the safety of their village, and so, like those who would come after him, he did what he felt was necessary to protect his brother's home. Nationalists tend to create their own narratives to interpret historical events in the way that fits their needs, to renew languages artificially, to mimic other nations, and to appropriate foreign traditions as their own. Motivated by a desire to connect their nation to a remote and illustrious past, nationalists do not hesitate whenever necessary to invent such links. We see that with his countless theories about how the Uchiha are a clan predisposed to evil and to hatred. And with that thought, Tobirama created the police force and gave it to the Uchiha, thus ostracizing the clan from the other village members, not only physically but psychologically. The isolation of the clan gave Tobirama a place where he could keep his watchful eye on the clan, quote, possessed by evil. These destructive narratives about the Uchiha were pushed along by the following generation, most notably Tobirama's student, Danzo Shimura. Danzo saw the clan as nothing but bodies belonging to the state, and he treated their eyes as such. All the while, he and the other Konoha elders blamed the Uchiha for the Nine-Tail attack. At the core of it all, the second Hokage, as well as Danzo, did not believe that the Uchiha clan carried the same level of loyalty and dedication to the village as they did, even though the Uchiha themselves willfully chose Hashirama as their leader back when the village was being created, and they cast Madara out. Throughout the Leaf's history, the Uchiha are positioned as anti-Konoha out of fear. The way Tobirama speaks about them, calling them scoundrels, using coded language, claims of their genetics being inherently evil, again and again he nor Danzo are ever challenged by the narrative. But when Uchiha shows genuine emotion because, say, their brethren were slain in war, they are positioned as the villains, and that is always extrapolated to them being against the village. As understanding as Hashirama was in his early days, the Senju created the narrative for the Leaf. History is decided by the victors. Nations and narratives are also decided by the victors. And while Danzo was orchestrating the demise of the Uchiha, the third Hokage stood idly by. He allowed the clan to be blamed, and he allowed their relocation to the outskirts of the village. This passivity is a component of nationalism.
And that's the thing, right? It is enabling by inaction, right? because you yourself are not speaking out against it. There's a quote somewhere, something I can't remember who said it. It's something along the lines of evil is allowed to flourish when good men do nothing, or something like that. If something is happening, such as the persecution and pigeonholing of people, which we can argue that the Uchiha clan being pigeonholed in this capacity are just completely, it's unjust. Like, it's not fair. That's not reasonable, logical. That's not in any way, shape, or form fair. So for Tobirama to just stand by idly and just let this happen, whether he was preoccupied or not, to allow this to happen, you could argue, well, it comes down to, if he did say something but the council voted him out of the Hokage position, would Danzo step up to be in the Hokage at that point? Could we end up in a situation that is worse off than before, and speaking out, at the end does nothing? That's semantics. That's really for the history books to remember at that point. The situation as it stands that we can look at is that he chose to do nothing. And even then, we can argue that some of these unfair practices extend to, and this is actually a big plot point that a lot of people in Naruto, the Naruto community, point out with some degree of just like, huh? Naruto Uzumaki was the son of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and his wife Kushina Uzumaki, right? And he was literally known as the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. So why in the ever-living fudge, for lack of trying to not curse as much, right, would you ever allow him to be anything other than a ward of the state that is, cared for, right? Why are you letting him effectively live like an orphan? Why are you letting people bully him? Why is he not? But then we can kind of see, I guess, a similarity between him and Gaara, right? Like, certain things just don't make sense with the Leaf, right? You're allowing effectively a nine-tailed fox WMD inside a child who is effectively living as an orphan to kind of be running around and being subject to the criticisms, gaze, wrath, ire, and bullying and harassment of others, right? Maybe not a good idea, right? Maybe a pretty awful idea. But even then, that could also be indicative, because of this treatment that Naruto himself received, despite he was a brat to gain attention, was he not? That could also speak volumes to the state of the Leaf Village at that point in time. That this structure of the Leaf, and we need to work together and use the will of fire for the generations to come. How is it treating the generations to come? How is it treating people like Naruto? How is it treating people like Sasuke? Especially after the wiping out of the Uchiha clan, right? Sure, he is a gifted genius for all intents and purposes, people, idolize and fawn over Sasuke, but I imagine Leaf sentiment, at least from the adult section, like, oh, well, he's the one that survived, right? And that's why Itachi literally shows up. It's not to, body Sasuke. Sure, part of it's to, reinforce his resolve, like, hey, I'm still around, I'm still kicking, but it was also as a warning to Danzo of, I'm still around. Do not touch Sasuke, because I am still here, right? That was why he showed up in part 1 again, right? When Jiraiya was there, burned out of the toad with Amaterasu. Layers.
Falls on Sarutobi and the other members of the Konoha Council. On nationalism, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, author and Professor Danielle Conversi writes that there is a bystander role in genocide that can occur where the apathy and heedlessness of international audiences and indifference towards collective rights and dignity can feed the machine of mass destruction.
Fact.
Philosopher Hannah Arendt famously explained how the key element of genocide is not interethnic hatred, as commonly assumed, but simple indifference towards fellow human beings. Passivity and indifference make up the raw material of genocide. The darkness that nationalism can bring forth has been accompanied by some of history's most violent episodes of ethnic cleansing, generally of minorities that were considered disloyal to the nation or suspected of collaborating with its enemies. The Ottoman Empire, the Holocaust, the Hindus and Muslims of India and Pakistan in 1947, and others.
I mean, insert your own thing. Cambodia, S21, Rwanda, many tragedies you can apply the same logic to, too numerous to count.
Itachi and the fate of the Uchiha clan is the prime example of nationalism in Naruto. Nationalism at its most extreme. But for me, the most alarming part of it all is how the story portrays this massacre. After chapter 399, Itachi's actions are praised by the narrative. He is given so much grace. Naruto hails the man as a hero. In chapter 549, Naruto mentions how Itachi made himself look like the quote, bad guy to save Sasuke and Konoha. Naruto doesn't bat an eye that this man committed genocide in the name of their village. Instead, he says that Itachi has done enough for the village. Hashirama, after hearing all that Itachi did in the village's name, he calls the young Uchiha a shinobi even greater than he was. Is it not odd that the first Hokage praises a child soldier for killing his entire bloodline? Is it not alarming that this idea is never confronted or really fought against?
He does bring up an excellent point, actually. That's something that I actually glossed over, and I'm really glad he's bringing up. Why is that the initial reaction? Is that not nationalism? Is that not at least some sort of society in which apathy and us versus them mentality is allowed to flourish? In fact, even rewarded?
Is there no commotion for the fact that blind loyalty is promoted and lauded over the lives of real people? When these lines of support are spoken by your protagonist, who is supposed to be both the moral compass and the moral paragon of this series, you are giving Itachi and the Leaf a pass for genocide. Bernard Yak writes, "Nationalism does not teach us that we can do no wrong when we act in service of the nation, or that we should be indifferent to the suffering of those who oppose the members of our community. But it does dispose us to act as if we did believe these things by lining up calculations of interest, feelings of communal loyalty, and beliefs about political legitimacy against the members of rival nations."
You know what this calls to mind? This calls to mind what happens after Naruto. Like, we're getting into like post and even Boruto status. Remember Kabuto? Literally one of the two parties that was like, yeah, cool, we're going to do this, Shinobi World War thing, this fourth Shinobi World War thing. Literally raised people from the dead, Edo Tensei, right? Literally cost so many lives. Last I checked, he's just chilling with a bunch of Uchiha clones from the Shin Uchiha arc, right? Sure, you could argue that he's changed from Itachi's, Itachi's Izanami, right? You could argue that he's a changed man from that. But he was still a rogue asset, a rogue spy from the Leaf that defected to Orochimaru, the village hidden, Sound Village even, right? Defected to Orochimaru. Orochimaru gets ganked, is one of the parties that initiates or really escalates the Shinobi World War and is kind of just around. Even in a post sense, we see how there's discord, malcontent. We see systems not working, and even then, we still see whether it's Kara, as I understand. Sure, I mean, yes, Otsutsuki plot points and stuff like that, right? But like, there's still discord, malcontent in the world. Like, the world, is it truly better off in Boruto than it was in Naruto? And that's a question you have to ask. How much of these Leaf ideologies, how much of these nationalist ideologies come over into Boruto, into the next era for the next generation? And as more subsequent generations live under such ideologies, it becomes harder and harder for them to distance themselves from that ideology because that's just their normal, right? Let's say you lived in an area where one day people get in a council together and they decide that anyone with blue eyes is a demon. Blue eyes is inherently profane as someone with blue eyes. Like, it's not just my model. I actually have blue eyes, so take that. But it is inherently just evil, right? Wicked. They need to be persecuted because it's unnatural. It's not standard. It's not brown. It's not green. These blue-eyed freaks must be cleansed. They must be purged, right? And then you get 4 or 5 generations down the line. How does someone who is born into that being the normal, and it's normal to them, right? How do they understand? How do they come to the realization that that's not in fact how that works? That it's just, okay, cool, this is just genetics at play there. And how do they go about even potentially reversing the damage? How do they change people's minds, right? These are all things that people around the world, even currently, are still having to come to terms with. This is a very small channel. Don't get me wrong. We're not solving macro issues here. This does outline that even in media, you run into things like this. You run into the vilification of individuals and organizations. You run into, we can do no wrong when it concerns interests, right? Where is Kabuto being even a ward of Konoha, right? Being a ward of the state, being, we keep an eye on him and we keep an eye on Orochimaru. We know they're doing stuff, right? Is that enough? Or is it just self-serving justifications to perpetuate actions? And if it does go wrong, who's really to blame? right? This is a huge moral and ethical debate. Even just taking it out of the series, there are absolutely IRL situations that you could run as parallel to this, right? What is right? What is wrong? Where is the line? Does a line even exist? Is it blurred? Is it finite? Is it bold? Right? All questions that people have to ask, but I think a lot are just incapable of answering that.
In doing so, it makes many ordinary members of a nation much more willing to go along with the relatively few individuals among them. The fanatics, the xenophobes, the self-seeking political entrepreneurs who do not recognize any moral constraints on our treatment of the members of other nations. Nationalism, I am suggesting, has a subtly insidious effect on our moral judgment. Rather than directly challenge moral restraints on our treatment of others, it corrodes and weakens them. Nationalism doesn't kill people, nationalists do. The most targeted, the most vulnerable group, the base of this story, are the children. Kakashi in chapter 35 of Naruto clearly states that he does not see the children of the leaf as children. They are soldiers. Even more than that, these child soldiers are the very vehicles that the leaf uses to promote nationalism, as they are ground zero for building up national identity and collective identity. They are the ones being taught that their village, their code matters more than any other, and that the honor of their villages supersedes everything. In the Chunin exams, we see exactly that in Sarutobi's speech. They fight to the death to help fulfill the dream that was envisioned by their ancestors. The youth and youth culture are often primary movers of general culture and sentiment. They are the ones who popularize movement and change. In Naruto, they are the most loyal and dedicated shinobi in every sense. Itachi Uchiha again stands as example number 1. Because he was a child of war, Itachi was molded and manipulated into becoming this perfect shinobi by both the third Hokage, the state, and by Danzo's Anbu. A shinobi who at 7 years old, was ready to sacrifice his heart for the village. Kakashi, as much as he is revered throughout the story, he is also one of Konoha's greatest soldiers. He is another victim of Konoha's nationalist ideals. Kakashi, who found his father's lifeless body as a result of the weight of the shinobi creed. Kakashi, whose best friend died as a child because he was thrust into the war of adults. Kakashi, whose other teammate also died young, who also took her own life, jumping in front of his own attack because she too was a child thrust into the war of adults, but she was carrying a weapon of mass destruction inside of her. And Rin chose the village over her own life, a child. And despite everything, this same Kakashi remains fiercely loyal to the village hidden in the leaves. The leaf and its nationalist ideals have ripped all of Kakashi's loved ones away from him and have left him with a depression that is subtly evident in the way that he carries himself and in some of the words that he says. Surrounded by death and loss, Kakashi has nothing else but to give himself to his nation. He's got nowhere to go, nowhere to run. Again, just like seppuku, at least Kakashi can gain a semblance of autonomy and control in a life where he has had none. Kakashi, Itachi, Naruto, and Sasuke, they are all victims. They are the examples of why Konoha places their faith and their trust into children, because children are easily moldable. You teach them that they are tools and they will become the sharpest. You tell them that it's either their clan or the village, and they will believe that there isn't a third choice. These nations promise glory, companionship, revenge, and being a ninja devoted to your country is the best way to not get othered. It's the best way for Naruto to be seen, to be loved. And we must extrapolate these ideas to every genin and jonin that have ever been raised in the village, in all the villages across the Naruto world. To go even further, Naruto, Gaara, Rin, Nohara, all extreme examples of tools for their nations, as they were all once Jinchuriki, walking weapons of mass destruction, children in service to their countries. They are symbols of political power and used as pawns on a chessboard for the greater battles between these nations. The Chunin exams are nothing but an arena wherein young shinobi fight, possibly to the death, for the honor of their lands. But is honor worth the death of children? The very thing Hashirama was so against when he was first building this village. The genin of the leaf are told this directly, and still none of them bat an eye at this nationalism. But can you blame them? This is the after effect of raising child soldiers. They've got unquestioning loyalty to the state.
That's their duty, is it not? A state that's trained child soldiers to fight, to grow up to become even more deadly tools. Is that not why they were raised? Is that not why they were there? Is that not why they exist? So it is seen as their duty in some capacity, right? Sure, we look at it and it's like, no, child soldiers, abhorrent. I think that child soldiers are, in reality, one of those really gray spots for a lot of people. And I can't imagine being any sort of military from around the world and having to encounter that. Like, how do you even begin to dissect that situation, to understand what is right, what is wrong? You do the best you can in that situation, and even going so far as, following whatever orders you are given, right? I can understand the baseline of that. We start discussing the morals and ethics and the impact of child soldiers. It's not... That gets into a weedy area really quickly. And Naruto, I think, is one of those pieces of media where you can discuss the morals and ethics behind it, right? Because literally a story about child soldiers, instead of, playing outside, instead of, learning, making friends, right? Instead of trying new things and finding out who they want to be, what are they? They are, for all intents and purposes, committing themselves to training and a life of warfare to be in service to the village, right? Is that what children should be doing? I'd argue in a civilized society, no. I think that children should be allowed to be children. But then again, that's a very personal thing. You could argue on pushing a narrative with that. So, the village systems are flawed. And we see that all throughout. Like, that's a large story. That's a large part of Naruto as a story, is that they are flawed systems. The villages themselves are inherently flawed. But even if they're inherently flawed, what do you do about it? How do you engage in Sasuke's ideology, where you'll assassinate the 5 Kage and burn the village system to the ground, and then you'll start anew? And because now you have access to potential reincarnation, immortality options, that you will be the sole dictator from the shadows, that you will control who does things, what happens, what events you will and will not allow? Do you engage in extreme authoritarianism, or do you engage in a Naruto approach where you acknowledge that the systems are wrong, but you work with the systems to fix the systems? I mean, we can see kind of a similar thing in Code Geass, right? The final fight between Colin and Suzaku on top of the Damocles, right? Where you have Suzaku who fights for... Suzaku fights for... what about the people that have to use the system? You're supposed to change the systems by using the very systems themselves, versus Colin, who argues, we shouldn't be using the systems if the systems are broken to make change. Two very, very opposite viewpoints coming in together with the same goal of changing the systems. So how do you change the systems? And I think that's that leads into Boruto territory. How will the next generation and the generations after, how will they answer the questions? Will the goals that we set out for, the goals that we achieve, the feats that we make, right? Will they retain themselves, right? Look at Code Geass once again, right? Lelouch ended up creating a period of peace, right? With his death at the end of R2, and even, I guess, technically Re3, right? His apparent death, being slain as the Demon King, ushered in a period of peace. And then we get into, Resurrection, which is the movie where it's like, year and a half peace, 2 years shattered because of... it's not Zodistan. That's Double O Gundam. I can't remember offhand, but whatever the Resurrection movie was, whatever country they went to, Zilkstan, right? Zilkstan did their thing. Even going to Rose of the Recapture, where cool, we have Neo Britannia, which is just a bunch of Britannian radicals. I'm not going to spoil the big plot point of who Char is, right? it's just Char. Look at Rose of the Recapture. It's just Char. Char Aznavour. And then we have a more radical Britannia coming back to take over the Hokkaido, right? And the very barrier that was meant to keep these Neo Britannians out is now a prison for a more radical Britannia, thus leading into, the feats that we achieve of peace get shattered by radicals and extremists and even nationalists, right? Well, nationalists wanting to retake land that they view as theirs, right? Calling Japanese 11s again, and leading into how the next generation will solve that. So I think that they have half of the equation here in regards to wanting to ensure the safety and prosperity of the village and systems for the future and future generations, but it's also serving as a poison because it's indoctrinating future generations to repeat old mistakes, and they will repeat ad infinitum until people know better and enough people get together to work towards a better solution.
The Konoha has effectively snuffed out any sort of individual thought that could have crept past the village, and the narrative plays a major role in highlighting which perspectives should be admired and which should be condemned. Naruto himself at the beginning of the series in the Land of Waves arc was firmly against the stance of shinobi being emotionless tools for their countries. He even cries and breaks the shinobi rules and creeds of being closed off and emotionless, his emotion even bringing Zabuza to tears. And yet, this very same protagonist, this very same kid, hails Itachi as a hero for cutting off his own heart and choosing the village above everything else. The narrative praises those who make these kinds of sacrifices, those who can endure for a nationalist cause. Danzo, who has had a hand in nearly every single political conflict and act against every other nation, is given a fairly clean death, and his actions are even romanticized by the narrative.
I would argue, going back to that specific scene, because I know the scene that they're talking, it's the Edo Itachi and Edo Nagato fight. I feel like that might be up to interpretation. I know that now that I know where he's coming from on this, I think that Naruto was more praising that he's had to live in the dark all these years, and not necessarily praising that he had to take out the entire Uchiha clan, but more for the fact that he's had to sacrifice so much of himself for the sake of maintaining peace in the village, which in itself, I mean, I think we're debating semantics at that point. I think it all rounds back around to, okay, but why is Naruto praising Itachi at that point, right? Why is his actions being praised? Which, if anything, is the shift in Naruto from, right, part one Naruto as a kid, you know, how could you be so cruel and heartless, to praising Itachi for acting cruel and heartless, right? Little bit of a duality there, and that's a very good thing to point out. So I think we could potentially debate semantics in regards to what is specifically being praised, but I think it all becomes a catch-all argument in regards to Itachi is being praised for actions that he has committed in the name of the village and sacrifices he's had to make for the name of the village as well.
Claims he did everything for the village. The story is so eager to place a character like Danzo as this morally gray person because of what he did for the village, and in that same light, clearly condemn the Akatsuki or Madara and leave very little room for their perspective, for their own hunt for peace and justice. Sasuke is one of the greatest examples of this framing. Is Sasuke wrong for not forgiving Konoha? Is he wrong for not wanting to follow Itachi's path of blind loyalty to a village that had him give up not only his childhood but his entire life and family? Is Sasuke's anger not justified? Instead, Sasuke's anger is often seen as worse than the actions that led him to this point.
So understand as well, Sasuke Uchiha is effectively a 16-year-old traumatized child soldier. His actions make a little bit more sense, right? Well, Sasuke is just so edgy. And would a person actually do this? Look, trauma, child soldier, having to relive abuse over and over again, literally finding out that your very understanding of the world is now shattered because of the Itachi revelation, right? Or sorry, revelation, words, brain, can't. Right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot that's unaddressed. There's a lot that Sasuke has going on. So he's not necessarily the most mentally stable individual. The fact that he keeps it so together just for so long is actually rather impressive. And that's even why his ideology changes over time, right? He goes from this very, I want to watch the world burn, and he kind of, shifts a little bit. And then at the end, when he has his opportunity before the last fight, he goes into, I'm going to burn the systems down, right? I'm going, this is going to be a revolution, right? And he's come to these conclusions from his own world experience. And you could argue he's absolutely being selfish because it's that he's experienced, and there's even a little bit, I guess, of pain. His philosophy of dishing out pain for others, and that you could argue maybe there's a grain of it in there. But his actions make a lot more sense through the understanding that he's a 16, 17-year-old troubled child who was never allowed to have a childhood. And this, in fact, is a product of the very systems that he wants to burn down. Like the systems that we're discussing, nationalism of the Leaf, evils of the Leaf Village, that led to this. This is a case where someone has enough cognizance and has had enough stuff happen to them that they come to the conclusion that burning it all down in a revolution is the way forward, is the way to continue. But that also ignores, by his own meaning, he doesn't care about anyone else. It's a very selfish way forward.
The oppression, the abuse, the ethnic cleansing that all precedes his desires are made to seem as if they pale in comparison to what he would do, that what was done was all necessary. Again, the Akatsuki are made up of shinobi who have all left their villages. Almost all of their motives are because they are victims of their country's nationalism or of the shinobi system. Sasori, Kisame, Kakuzu, Itachi, Konan, they have all suffered because of what their nation's pride did to them. But none are given the grace that, say, Danzo is given. This is the perspective that the story tells us. The narrative tells us that we must sacrifice in order to achieve our goals, but it tells us that it ultimately doesn't matter what those sacrifices are as long as they are for the village.
And that's the one. That's how you tie it together. Why is Danzo different? Because he sacrificed for a greater ideology that is more widely accepted. He did not sacrifice himself for his art. He did not sacrifice himself so information would not get into the wrong hands. You could argue he sacrificed, so Shishu's eye wouldn't fall into the hands of Obito and Sasuke, right? But why was it done? It wasn't done for art. It wasn't done in the interest of other parties not getting something, at least not solely. It wasn't done in the interest of really even the greater good, I would argue. It was a sacrifice done for the village. And because it was a sacrifice done for the village, it will always, in this shinobi system, be treated as greater.
As long as they are for something greater, even if that sacrifice is human lives. Konoha specifically, and the rest of the Naruto world, has been built up through a nationalist ideal, and it has not changed. The three trailblazers of the Naruto world are Hashirama Senju, of course Naruto himself, and Sasuke. Three people who were strong enough to change the world, to alter the shinobi world. Hashirama, despite acknowledging the need for children to not be soldiers, and acknowledging the inherent faults that lie in the shinobi system, his village became a shinobi village, thus giving the shinobi system a foundation to build on. Naruto and Sasuke had a chance to change the shinobi world, to beat down upon the systems that have impacted their very lives. The reason Naruto is an orphan, with a weapon of mass destruction inside of him. The reason he was bullied and ostracized as a kid. At least Hashirama tried. At least he had an ideal in mind. But for Naruto and Sasuke, the two who truly had the chance to change the shinobi world, to change the system, they didn't even try. The system that thrives on nationalist ideals and its berserkness continues, never to be again challenged as it once was back in the very first arc. As much as we love this series and are enamored by its many fascinating characters and the world and this story, it's important to look critically at the messages that these stories send. It's essential to ask questions, like why is Itachi hailed as a hero, and why doesn't Naruto challenge the systems that have oppressed him and his loved ones? Now, whether the author believes in these ideas and themes or not is up to them, but we as an audience have a duty to think about these stories critically and form our own opinions on what these themes and messages are.
Oh my god, this man speaks reason. I love this man. Oh my god, I have literally been preaching this for I don't know how long, right? Regardless of what an author believes, regardless of what the source material is, you have the series in front of you, right? Look at something as divisive as Gundam 00, right? Gundam, a series that is notoriously very anti-war, right? You take that as you will, right? The message inherently in the first episode of Gundam 00, we are celestial being. We are here to for the eradication of war by the use of armed interventions. Literally fighting fire with fire. Ending war with war. Not discriminating against any sides, ideology, etc., right? And it is up to you as the viewer, as the reader, as the person intaking the content, to come to your own educated conclusions about the subject. Whether you think that, celestial being is in the right for fighting fire with fire, means justifying the ends, maybe. Whether you think that they're wrong and they're part of the problem. I mean, sure, we get answers to that later on, but it's up to you to look at things like this critically, to look at Naruto and go, maybe a system that inherently just has child soldiers feed the machine probably isn't the best world. Probably not a good idea, right? Probably pretty questionable, right? Where other people could go, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you have a fast repopulation rate. I mean, you're not having to worry about dogmatic older ideology. You can more easily and readily update materials as long as you handle this correct. Like, and that's where discussion and discourse comes into play, and finding the best path forward.
And whether we agree or disagree with them. The point is that it's okay to challenge the artist. Here, Weebcrit and I have asked why this story in particular upholds the values that it does. And we continue to ask if these are the correct messages to be sending to the youth, and in particular young boys, so that the next generation can have stories that challenge the status quo in unique and healthy ways, so that there exists a place where stories don't necessarily always have to parallel real life, especially for the young boys of the future, so they can imagine a future where self-sacrifice isn't a part of their identity, where they don't have to live up to the incredibly demanding and often self-harming ideals of the past and sometimes present, so they can imagine a future where they can just exist. Naruto is about many things, I think. A series about friendship, bonds, sacrifice, a series about love, like I once said. But this isn't love. This is not friendship. It's not sacrifice. These are not bonds. This is the price of nationalism.
I like it. I like it. That was a very good piece. I think it ended a little suddenly. I think there could have been a couple more lines of dialogue and exposition. I like that, though. I thought that was a really great piece. And I hope that, like, especially if you're looking at this and you're like, well, why should I care about Naruto? Why? This is the meme series with, you know, funny episodes and shoving hand seals in certain places. Like, why should I care about this? Because it's the same reason that I talk. Sorry, smug a lot in U.S. labor rates. Oh my God, sorry, that popped into my head. It's the same reason why I'll watch things like High School of the Dead for the plot specifically, because it deals with society in a post-apocalyptic world and how society and individuals within that society engage with such a mass traumatic event. You have a teacher who becomes effectively a cult leader using his knowledge for ill gains, right? You have parents using their knowledge that they may not have been the best parents, but giving their daughter, Takagi, the tools to succeed and hoping that she's a better parent than they were, right? You have people like Saiko Busujima, my favorite character in the series, who is a very reserved, even very shy, but very strong personality who imparts that they have that inner darkness inside of them, that darkness that they feel good from having a sense of power over others, from exerting themselves over others, and others coming to accept that, whether that's ambiguous or not, that's left to be seen. You know, High School of the Dead, once you understand there will never be a season 2 on rewatch, definitely carries a little bit of a different meaning behind it. But to be able to look at themes like that, to look at, you know, how people operate. The best question I have always said you can ask is why. Why is something the way that it is? Why are soldiers in Naruto primarily children? Why does Kakashi refer to them no longer as children, but as soldiers? Why do we take that as a good thing when looking at the narrative? And why would we take something along the lines of the Akatsuki having children and saying they're not children anymore, they're Akatsuki? Why would we see that as bad? Just because it's not affiliated to a major village, just because we view it as, oh, well, the Akatsuki are just terrorists, right? They clearly abducted these children. Why is the best question you can ever ask. And it's one of those questions that is an infinite question. When you ask why on something, you will always be able to ask why. Why is Naruto a series about love? Well, okay, well, you know, XYZ reasons. Well, why did Hashirama do this? Okay, well, he did this because of this reason. Well, why did Hashirama's ideology change? And then it goes into another discussion. Well, I mean, you know, why? Eventually, you could maybe come to a point where it's so binary that asking why could be seen as counterproductive, counterintuitive, even. But I mean, you can look at that in a similar vein as like, you know, what we can discuss. Why is an apple red, chat? Why would the apple be red? Okay, well, the apple's red. I mean, we need pigmentation. At a certain point, questions in philosophy become BS, right? There's a healthy balance between the philosophy, that philosophical aspect of it, and the aspect of, okay, but doing things. And I think there is a correct call out here that Naruto and Sasuke, even after all they've been through, were determined to not change the very systems. And we see fallout of this in Boruto, where we see Onoki trying to make whatever things he was trying to make. Homunculus, I think, was one of there were a couple things in Boruto like that. Kabuto's still around. Certain systems in Boruto still don't work. I'm not the most well read on Boruto, so I do apologize for not providing many specific examples. But it would not surprise me if even more down the line, we even see Boruto and Kawaki completely just obliterate the systems, which we kind of get the village itself, the Hidden Leaf Village, is destroyed in the opening, which is left ambiguous as to if it was Boruto or Kawaki that did it. But I've gushed on for long enough. I don't get often the chance to talk about Naruto, not in any great depth. And I want to once again thank Sage's Reign for making just absolutely amazing content. There are definitely sides of the Naruto community and even the anime community that I don't really associate with. Many that will outright dismiss Naruto as having so much filler, or, well, Sasuke's just edgy. In a lot of aspects he is, or, well, it doesn't have a compelling narrative. And I would, I'd submit the original video by Sage's Reign, linked in the description, by the way, as evidence that there's a far greater narrative beneath it. Do you necessarily need to agree with everything here? Do you need to agree with everything he said? Do you need to agree with everything I've said? No, but as Sage's Reign himself said, make your own educated, come to your own educated conclusions. Take in that information, and with that information, make your own educated decisions and assumptions, and educate yourself. That way, when somebody asks you about it, or this comes up, you have an enriched understanding of the subject matter. However, that is going to be it for the Naruto video. So thank you everyone for watching. I've been doing a lot of these longer ones recently. Let me know if you actually like the longer ones or not. This was definitely a passion upload. This is definitely not going to do well, which I hope doesn't reflect poorly on Sage's Reign. Definitely go check him out. I've linked him down below for you. Thank you all for watching.